I am compiling shaders on Borderlands 4. We are going to test out its performance because it's already getting a bunch of negative Steam reviews, calling out terrible optimization, another Unreal Engine 5 casualty, Stutterlands 4 review, won't even launch immediately, crash. This sucks. So, okay, there's that. Now, we'll also be investigating the system requirement situation because, first of all, unlike most system requirements these days, they do not list what sort of performance to expect. Not a resolution, not graphic settings, not frame rate. So we'll take a look at that. And then also, we've had statements from the CEO, which I talked about in a recent video, mentioning that the day one patch should help compared to what early reviews saw. So I'm on the full release version of the game. I bought it, downloading it now. We'll get whatever patch is available. And he also mentioned things like the game running at all below minimum spec would just be an absolute miracle. But he doesn't state what sort of performance to expect from the minimum requirements. So what sort of PC did I build that I'm running the game on right now? And if you need to build a new PC for this game or maybe other games, maybe more optimized games, you should check out Jawa.gg. This is where you buy, sell, and upgrade between gamers. And best of all, I can save you $10 off your first purchase using code OWEN10. And a huge thank you to Jawa for sponsoring this video. Now, you can buy an entire pre-built system. You can find exactly what you're looking for, performance in a specific game, specific CPU or GPU combos, price ranges, styles that fit your overall setup for your room. I know oftentimes the gaming PC setup is like the whole centerpiece of your room, but you can also buy individual parts. And how are you going to pay for them? Well, you can turn your gear into extra cash by selling your old CPU or GPU. You can make your own listing, even maybe make a side business selling parts on Jawa, but also you could take the maximum convenience route and get an instant offer to sell directly to Jawa by clicking this button, and they'll give you an instant offer for your CPU or GPU. There's tons of great reviews, highly recommended. Again, use code OWEN10 for $10 off your first purchase, and click the link in the video description and or pinned comment. So what I built is a something pretty similar to the minimum spec, but not exactly, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I want to investigate the statement that 8-core CPUs are literally required, but then also asterisked as or equivalent. So what would that mean? Because you either have 8 cores or you don't. So one interpretation could be you need at least 8 threads available, so like a 4-core 8-thread might work. But another interpretation, which I think is probably more accurate to what they actually mean here, is that a newer CPU, but with fewer cores, should be fine as well. So they listed a Ryzen 7 2700X or a Core i7 9700 as the minimum spec. So what I've done instead is I've chosen a newer but fewer core CPU, which usually in most games makes up for the lack of cores just fine. So I'll be using a Ryzen 5 5600X for our min spec build, which is generally better at gaming than a Ryzen 7 2700X, even though it's 6 cores. So we'll see if that's kind of what they mean by or equivalent and how that does. For the graphic situation, they list an RTX 2070 as the min spec. And is that going to get you, low settings with upscaling, below 1080p at 30 frames per second? Or is that like medium settings, native 1080p at 60 FPS? Let's find out because they didn't tell us. Now, I don't actually have a 2070, but I do have something in that ballpark. I have an RTX 3060 that's one generation newer, but since it's a performance tier down as the 60 class instead of the 70 class, it should be a good representation of similar performance. Tech PowerUp, for example, has it as only 8% faster than the 2070. Now, my 3060 is a 12 gigabyte card, so if 8 gigabyte cards are struggling here, we won't necessarily see those struggles or stutters, but what we can monitor is the VRAM utilization. So in the benchmark PC, notice that I can show in the GPU memory here. The first number is the allocation for this for the VRAM, and the second number is the per process usage. Now, if either of these go over 8, we'll notice that it's possible that 8 gigabyte cards would be struggling in that situation. We can also monitor GPU utilization to see if we are seeing any kind of CPU bottlenecking. So what's the issue here, the CPU or the GPU? Because it looked fairly demanding on both on the system requirements. Now, right now our CPU is 100% utilized because we're compiling shaders, which is done on the CPU. If we get into game and notice the GPU dipping below 100% utilization, anything meaningfully, like anything below like 95%-ish, that usually indicates the GPU is waiting for something else in the system, which is usually either the CPU or the RAM, but that won't always show 100% utilization on the CPU. So we'll need to keep our eyes out for that, and I'll try to call things out as I see them. As we test this out. Anyway, I'm going to allow the shaders to finish compiling. They're at 69, nice right now, and I can just edit crap in as we get started in the game. All right, shaders are done compiling. Let's take a look at the graphics. So one thing I'm going to do is run this at the beginning at its defaults for the hardware I began on. So this was the min spec on the system requirements, and indeed at 1080p, it is recommending just by default. You know what, let's do the auto detect again, but it did start out at the low settings, and let's make sure that that is where it ends up here. Yeah, so it does default to the low preset, which notice doesn't even default to native 1080p resolution. It defaults to using TSR upscaling at the quality setting. Spatial upscaling, I don't think you should use really here. That would be like FSR 1, as opposed to 2 or 3 or 4. And then scene capture quality seems to be loading the things in like map and inventory, all of that. And basically everything here is just turned down to low or medium, but medium if it's like the lowest possible setting. Foliage density at very low. It looks like it might go lower. Maybe there's like a complete off. But generally, there's a lot of adjustability here, but it's looking like we're pretty much starting out as low as we can go. TSR with a quality level upscaling on a 1080p output is 720p internally being upscaled to a 1080p resolution. Now, I'm not just going to necessarily stay at these graphics settings, but for now, I'm going to start with those. Also, I've turned online play off because I'm not really going to be playing the game normally because we'll be talking about settings and everything. So let's go ahead and get started. And how do I actually start a match? Connect? No, I don't want to be online. Stay offline. How do I wait? You do not meet the minimum requirements to access this feature. What feature? Playing online? That's weird. Oh, new game. Here's the new game button. There we go. It was hard to see behind all of my stuff. So let's just start it out on normal and see how things go. I'll likely edit out bits where not much is happening and mention things when things are happening. All right, so it looks like we start out with just like an animated cutscene. There's not really much interesting PC-wise happening here, so I think I'm gonna kind of skip through that if it allows me to. Okay, performance-wise, seems like we're actually rendering this on my PC. And it looks like our frame rates are in the little over the 60 range, but also interestingly, I'm noticing the GPU is not fully utilized right now. And the CPU is working pretty hard. So it actually looks like we're a little over 60 FPS, but it's actually CPU limited right now. But there's not really anything happening. I don't know what's being rendered outside of this situation. I also don't know anything about these characters. Apparently we got different elemental affinities, etc. I don't know, guys. We're just clicking on the first person. And I'm going to just select this. Please don't judge my gameplay, because to get you guys performance numbers as quickly as possible, I am just going to go ahead and start playing the game without thinking too much about it. Notice we are completely CPU limited right now. The CPU had shot to like 100% utilization. We're below 30 FPS. The GPU, okay, are we now... Okay, I think we're 30 FPS capped on the cutscene. I think that's what's going on now. But briefly, we shot to 100% CPU utilization. So it seems like they're like loading in the next area, like as we transition to it, and that spiked on the CPU. But now the CPU's calmed down. Looks like we're kind of 30 FPS capped. Am I going to be able to skip through this this thing exactly? Doesn't really. Oh wait, here we go. Skip. Okay. So as we skip into the next thing, notice the CPU spikes to 100% again. So yeah, it seems like as you load into the next area, it's certainly going to be doing some CPU spikes. It's possible that they're compiling more shaders as you load into the next area. That's possible. And maybe they would have hidden some of that shader compilation under the cutscene had I not skipped over it. That's possible. Definitely had a frame time spike right there. So kind of felt like the sort of frame time spike you get from shader compilation issues. Wow, my mouse sensitivity is way too high. Let me play around with the mouse sensitivity button slightly. Okay. By the way, screen tearing is going to be caused by us not using VSync. I'm capturing externally on a capture card, and we are not locked to 60 FPS, which means there is going to be some screen tearing that you wouldn't see on a variable refresh rate display. If you have one. Okay, interestingly, we still seem to be CPU limited. There was a big spike as we first saw something. That tends to be shader compilation stutter. This gun has a lot of recoil or something. It's sort of strange. Woo, big stutter right there once again. By the way, for stutter, monitor the frame time graph. You won't be able to necessarily see stutter in a YouTube video. You might be able to, depending on the side of the stutter. But look at the frame time graph. Anytime you see one of those spikes, that is stutter. So make sure that you are keeping your eye on the frame time graph. I have felt noticeable gameplay interrupting stutter on multiple occasions so far in the few seconds I have had control. Once again, we seem to be CPU limited. The GPU is only around 85% utilization right now. You can see that. The CPU is spiking up super high. So yeah, this is certainly CPU limited performance right now. And again, that's on a Ryzen 5 5600X. It's not an 8-core CPU, but it is more powerful than the 8-core CPUs that they had listed. So I would actually expect those to perform worse than this. It's also a pretty common CPU and is more powerful than what we see in like a PS5, for example. Okay, apparently we have health healing stuff. If I press T, got it. Press T to heal. And we've got to get to the next floor. I'll also say that, you know, if one of the reasons they've listed for like big CPU requirements is, you know, a bigger open world, I will say that right now we're like in a corridor with 2 people. And GPU utilization at 84% indicates we are CPU limited right now. VRAM wise, I'm only seeing 5.5 allocation and 4.5 utilization per process. So indicating we are not currently, by the way, frame time spike there again when he died, indicating probably a shader compilation stutter. Anyway, so at low settings at least, at 1080p, it doesn't seem like we'll be having VRAM issues. But I really dislike this gun right now. Just saying, it does not feel good to use. There was another big frame time spike there, by the way. Okay, I should probably press T to heal. Is that on a cooldown, or do I have like some specific amount of them available? I don't know. Anyway, here, I'm gonna go ahead and start running some frame rate averages. So you can see more frame rate numbers, FPS numbers just popped up. The middle one is the average since I clicked the button to run the average. It's cumulative average. The one on the right that currently says 47, now dropped to 46, that's the 1% lows. So that's another way to check kind of frame times and kind of when some performance is lower than you would want, is using that. Okay, what is this? We are going to equip this pistol, maybe? DPS is lower, DPS is higher. Let's do that. Equip this gun. Can I have more than one gun? Okay, maybe instead of this? I don't know. I don't know, guys. We got stuff. Maybe it'll be better than what we had before. Maybe it will not be. I did not pay attention to if I'm supposed to be doing something right now, but there's a glowy thing right here. All right, it did open the door. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna say, considering we're already on low settings and upscaled, this is not super promising. Also, I'm gonna try out native resolution because if we're already mostly CPU limited, I might as well see if maybe my GPU could at least handle native resolution at a similar frame rate. So we are going to play with these. Let's see. We'll go with upscaling disabled. So upscaling is now disabled, so I believe we should now be running at native resolution, but still low settings at 1080p output. Reset the frame rate counter. Okay, looks like we're in the mid 40s. GPU utilization is higher though, it's in the 90s. So we're now more GPU limited than CPU limited and kind of in the mid 40 FPS range. Again, everything's already on the low preset, so there's not a lot of additional scalability. I've got to say that I struggle to see how they couldn't have produced better frame rates. Am I supposed to be hiding or something? Did I just Alt-Tab out of the game? I think I just Alt-Tabbed out of the game. I was to see if we would get, to see if I could draw my weapon. I currently do not have my weapon out. Why is my weapon not out? 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna hold E to give up because I want to respawn and see if I respawn with my weapon out. I don't know why my weapon wasn't out. I'm a little bit confused. Okay, anyway, like I said though, I have not been paying a whole lot of attention to the gameplay. Are these, did I throw my guns down? Is that what happened? How did I throw my guns down? I don't even understand. Okay, I have guns now. Let's keep going. I didn't know there was a throw down your weapon button, but apparently I must have accidentally hit it. All right, let's keep rolling. Again, mostly GPU limited and performance is not amazing. Kind of the mid 40s. So, I mean, I do see why they listed these as kind of minimum specs. Certainly not getting a native 1080p low 60. It's kind of in that mid 40s no man's land. And I'm gonna be shocked if this is the most demanding area of the game. Also, I do not know where all the performance is going. This kind of comic book art style, I'm sure they're calculating it in some way that's very demanding. Must be maybe the lumen lighting or nanite or something from Unreal Engine 5. But I can't help but feel this could have been achieved in a less demanding way, if that makes sense. Something that looks comic booky, but maybe doesn't take the big performance cost. That's what I'm sort of wondering in this case. All right, am I supposed to do something with that, or do we just keep rolling? I guess we just keep rolling. It was glowing, so I wanted to check. All right. Should we change the graphic settings? I mean, I don't see any reason to go above the low settings because our performance is already terrible. So what if I switch to DLSS, upscaling, not frame generation, and I went with, let's start with DLSS quality, because that'll probably be similar to the performance we got with TSR quality. Oh, I see how I threw down the gun, I think. So I have my benchmarking hotkeys set to home to start a run and end to like freeze or cancel a benchmark. But apparently when I press end, I throw down my weapon. So end must be the hotkey for throwing down your weapon in this game. So I will have to make sure I am not using that. So I can just reset the benchmark counter by hitting the home button. Okay, looking like performance now is in the 70 range. So performing better than we did with the TSR, but we're also in a different scene. So I think this scene is probably just easier to run. Remember, we had been mostly CPU limited before on the TSR as well. So I really just think that this scene is somehow less CPU demanding than the scene we were at earlier. Again, what is taking up the CPU though? Like, there's one AI character and like 2 AI enemies and like an empty hallway. So it must be Lumen stuff, I guess? I don't know, guys. I need to follow his lead though. What button do I press? What button do I press? V. I grapple with V. So we're gonna grapple with V. All right. We've got to slide down. Come on. I'm not a super fan of the voice acting on that character currently, but I think that's kind of a Borderlands thing, maybe the kind of the over-the-top acting. But, haha, woo, haha. Let's try spinning. That's a neat trick. Sort of the vibes I'm getting from that. Okay, we get some reflections in the water here on the low settings, but all right. Okay, performance here is at least in the 70s. I will say that. I'm just not seeing why it needs to be this demanding, though. All right, I am curious, since we're getting a bit more performance here, though, what if I switch over to medium graphics settings? So let's go ahead. So I've restarted the game, and I'm noticing something interesting, at least interesting to me. I'm just standing here doing absolutely nothing, and we are CPU limited to below 60 FPS. Notice the CPU cores are extremely utilized, and the GPU usage percentage, which is actually the best indicator, because you can be CPU limited without all the cores being at 100%. The GPU usage is currently like mid 80% range. But do you notice that now performance is increasing a bit now? We went up from like 58 to now we're like in the mid 60s. So it seems like, are they like loading stuff in the background, like further into the level? Is that what's happening here? Because again, it just does not seem like anything happening here should be requiring the CPU usage to be anywhere near what we're actually seeing. But anyway, it is what it is. And yeah, we're getting around 60 FPS at the medium settings, but it is primarily CPU limited. But let's see what happens as we get into this area. And again, we are under 60 FPS. Kind of going over again now. Let's go ahead and I'm going to double check the graphic settings. Maybe it changed them while I did the restart. That would be frustrating. But no, it looks like we are on medium settings, DLSS quality, yeah, anywhere at 1080p output on the display. So there is that. Let's go ahead and keep pushing on. But yeah, it seems interesting how CPU limited we are. Okay, looks like left control to crouch, guys. I've always preferred C to crouch myself, but we'll go with left control. Now we're getting up closer to 70 at times. Am I supposed to just be running through, or am I actually supposed to be fighting right now? Also, I'm not really sure if hip fire's the way to go here or scoping in's the way to go. So we're just gonna try a little bit of both. Okay, this does have some auto fire. I was tap shooting. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and kick on the averages again. But it seemed like we were around 60 FPS. So yeah, it is looking like the, again, min-spec-ish PC is around 60 FPS at medium settings, 1080p output, but with resolution scaling. We're at DLSS quality. Again, I do think the game looks good for the style it's going for. It's just, I do really feel like you could achieve this style in a more performant way. But this is probably getting us a lot of, like I said, dynamic lighting and such, which maybe wouldn't, like when I shoot over here, you can see like, it does light up the area. So I think maybe like, if we are using kind of global illumination that is pretty demanding, you are getting something for it, like the way that light reacts. So it's not like you aren't getting anything for the performance. But yeah, looks like this PC RTX 3060 Ryzen 5 5600X is hanging out around 60-ish FPS, and we're pretty heavily utilizing both the CPU and the GPU in order to get there. Now, I'm curious right now if we plug in something closer to the recommended PC, but I want to kind of do that in 2 steps. Wait a second, where did my system requirements go? I want to kind of do this in 2 steps. I want to try the RTX 3080 on my Ryzen 5 5600X CPU to confirm how CPU limited we are on that with a more powerful GPU. But then I also want to try putting the RTX 3080 into a higher end CPU system to see how far the 3080 is able to go. So I think that'll be what we test out next. All right, we are launching in on the RTX 3080. We are currently on the Ryzen 5 5600X system, and interestingly, it must definitely compile shaders by the zone that you're in because, well, it did do the compiling shaders at the beginning. When I'm now continuing my save to get into a new location, looks like it compiles shaders again. So again, that kind of confirms, I think, why CPU usage spikes really high when you enter a new area or load. But anyway, let's go ahead and see how we do. So again, we are on the Ryzen 5 5600X based system, but we are now on the RTX 3080. This is the 12 gigabyte version, but overall performance is the same as the original 10 gigabyte version. Well, maybe like 5% faster. I'm not remembering where exactly it was I was supposed to be going. So let's wander around and do that. Hey, there's a guy. Let's follow the guy. All right, looks like we are CPU limited. The GPU is hitting in the like mid 70% usage range, which tells me that, again, what we're really seeing right now is the limitations on the Ryzen 5 5600X. And in this scene, we are, in fact, CPU limited. Looks like our frame rate was bouncing between... Ooh, a huge frame rate spike there, by the way. You can see the frame time graph. Anyway, we were bouncing between a little under 60 and now up into the mid-70s, but it is still CPU limited, which means I don't think it makes a lot of sense to continue testing performance on this system. I think we could check out the 3080 on a system with a more powerful GPU, and we might learn more about the 3080. But right now, again, we're at 1080p medium settings using DLSS quality. So the 3080 is clearly capable of higher frame rates at these settings, but the rest of the system's holding it back. All right, we're on the RTX 3080, but I have now placed it in a high-end benchmarking PC. It has a 9800X3D, so basically the fastest gaming CPU out there. And let's talk graphic settings, because they are now what it defaulted to, rather than what we were using before. So again, this being the recommended GPU, I wanted to see what would happen. It's defaulted to the high preset, so things are going to look better than they did before. We're pushing things a bit farther, and it defaulted to upscaling TSR at the quality setting. I'll switch it over to DLSS pretty quick, but I want to see how the game defaulted to if you're somebody who just puts in the game on the recommended GPU. So you can see the settings here. Again, no frame generation or anything enabled, but again, it is upscaling at the quality setting using TSR. And we're at 1440p, because I thought seeing how this would work on a 1440p display at the default settings on the recommended GPU probably makes a lot of sense. All right, let's go ahead and get some frame rate averages going. And it is looking like we're getting 69, nice. All right, and again, we're not gonna have to worry, hopefully, too much about the CPU now, so I kind of not bothering to show all the cores because we're mostly gonna be GPU limited, at least I really would hope so. Looks like our GPU utilization is in the upper 90% range, so that is indeed looking to be the case. All right, so in this area, when we are at these high settings and we're not GPU limited, sorry, not CPU limited, looks like we are able to perform kind of in the 70s or so on the RTX 3080. Now this is using the default TSR quality upscaling, but I'm now going to switch it over to DLSS upscaling, which should probably have pretty similar performance, but generally has better image quality. So we're now on DLSS quality, and I'll reset the frame rate averages. Again, looking pretty similar overall performance-wise. But we are, I think, looking a little bit better using DLSS. This game does have DLSS 4 support on the launch driver and all that. So we are looking here very good on the image quality. And again, I want to be clear. I do think the graphics in this game are good. The graphics are actually good. I just, you know, the performance is not amazing. It was especially rough on that lower end CPU, so didn't really like seeing that. Am I supposed to do something to unlock this? I'd like to get through this area, though, because I do think you get kind of a bigger open world thing soon after, probably. Again, still looking to be mostly GPU limited. Thank goodness, since we're on a super high-end CPU now. But again, that was a bit of a worry on anybody who doesn't have a super great CPU. All right, I think we are now into kind of more of the main area of the game. Oh, there's Claptrap. Right, so it's looking like, by the way, I mean, the graphics do here look nice. I will say, like, this is demanding, but this does also look pretty nice. Again, we're still on the RTX 3080 on the super high-end CPU system in this kind of newer area of the game. And yeah, looking like we're in the upper 60s, averaging 69 right now in this area. All right, let's take on some combat in this new area and see how all that goes. Again, looking kind of like upper 60s for the most part. Here, let's reset the frame rate counter now that we're actually in combat and see how we do. Yeah, kind of lower 60s actually, it looks like. All right, what's in the lockers? Is this probably not the time to be doing that? Okay, there is an enemy right there. Some weird, like, okay, he's crawling around on his hands. He has no legs. All right, weird guy. Yeah, it looks like kind of mid-60s at these settings in this area and all that. Let's go ahead and shift some graphic settings a little bit. Let's try out DLSS performance mode, still with the 1440p output, and still at the high settings. Let's see what that gets us. Again, if you're CPU limited, upscaling with DLSS does not help your situation. All right, looks like we now have the press Z to get the magical line towards your next objective button. So we will follow that and see what happens. Again, we're now at DLSS performance mode, but high settings, 1440p output. This art style does seem to work particularly well with upscaling, I will say. Things like the grass, they're maybe a little breakup on it. But again, this style of art, I think, is pretty easy for a good quality upscaler to handle. So overall image quality here is still pretty good. And we're kind of in the mid 80 FPS range, which is fine. Again, as long as the CPU can keep up. We saw that the Ryzen 5 5600X was definitely having some issues at times. What is this guy doing? Feels like his AI is a little bit trapped in that hole. He went back in the hole. No, he went out of the hole. Where is he? That's him. Okay. Let's kind of keep on rolling. Press the magic where am I supposed to go button. Okay, we're supposed to go this way. And more random animals to slaughter. That's always good. What other gun do I have? Let's see. What is this? Oh, that's kind of interesting. This looks like a rapid-fire revolver. All right, moving into this area. Again, performance seems to be along these lines. Now, I am curious, what if we were playing on a 1080p display? So we're going to go ahead, and I think I got to switch to full screen to have adjustment of the resolution scaling. So we're going to go to 1080p, but I am going to try out native resolution at 1080p. So we're going to turn upscaling off. So native 1080p, high preset. Let's go ahead and see where we're at. So in other words, like, how does the recommended GPU do at 1080p high settings, native resolution? Looking like we're kind of in the mid-60s, if this area is anything to go by. Let's play a little bit longer on these settings and see how it goes. Again, especially in this area as opposed to where the game first started, I do actually like the look of the game. I think it is doing a good job capturing this kind of comic book art style, and does look like a significant upgrade. Really vibrant colors. You know, the textures aren't, you know, super detailed because it is going for the, you know, the Borderlands comic book style and all that, but it is it is good looking. I do think the game looks good. I still think a lot of people are gonna have trouble accepting the performance level we're getting from the hardware on a very, comic book looking game. And I'm sure we could have done that. Something similar could have been done that maybe doesn't look quite as nice, but would potentially perform a lot better. Notice we're dropping below 60 FPS here. Again, high settings, not even max settings, at 1080p native resolution. We could try DLSS quality. So we're on the 3080 again, so we're going to try out some DLSS quality, even on the 1080p output, and see if that at least keeps us over 60 FPS. Looks like it helps out quite a bit. We're actually into the upper 70s now. It's take a lot of hits. I think at some point I'll need to find, better gear. This is definitely, gear finding game. All right, yeah, around 80-ish FPS at these settings. Where am I supposed to be going? Looks like we follow the yellow line here. Okay, got some of these things coming in here. Let's try this gun, except it has to reload. All right. Okay, I should actually pay attention here. I might die. I did die. No, I didn't die. I can fight for my life. Okay, I don't like how frequently this gun has to reload. That is not enjoyable. Okay. Anyway, yeah, so performance on the 3080, okay, it's the recommended GPU, and you can certainly play the game at high settings if you're using upscaling at either 1080p or 1440p. But not the most amazing experience, in the entire world on a 3080. But, it's Unreal Engine 5. It's demanding. It does, like I said, look good, but, yeah, certainly not easy to run. I'm actually more concerned about the CPU issues that we were seeing on the 5600X than I am about the GPU performance. Because GPU performance can scale. You can turn down graphics settings. As we've seen, you can, use upscaling. It'd be nice if you got good performance at native, but at least upscaling is helping things out here. What I don't like is, that I'm about to die, just realized. What I don't like is when the CPU is very difficult to deal with, because there's not a lot you can do about that other than upgrade your CPU. So anyway, I think that's enough for testing out the minimum and recommended specs. So remember, that's what we tested out. Looks like the recommended GPU is good for around 60 FPS high settings at 1080p native, but does drop below. Using upscaling keeps you above it. And the minimum specs are good for 60-ish FPS at 1080p, but low settings using upscaling, and definitely below 60 FPS when not using upscaling, even at the low settings. And the CPU requirements are no joke. It doesn't require an 8-core CPU, but, even a fairly reasonable mid-range 6-core like the 5600X was certainly not getting a high frame rate experience. Usually well over 60 FPS, but not always, and certainly not talking triple digits or anything like that. Are you guys interested in more testing of this game beyond the min and recommended specs? I could do a 5090, see what it's like to try to max this game out. I could do 5070 Ti versus 9070 XT. Let me know if you're interested in more testing in the comment section. Hope all you have an excellent day and found this video useful and or interesting. And don't forget to check out Jawa.gg if you need an upgrade, where you buy, sell, and upgrade between gamers using code OWEN10 for $10 off the first purchase. Follow the link in the video description and pinned comment.